Why do you feel so alone? Keep watching. This is Life Mastery Gym. I'm Damon Card, and I teach people just like you cutting-edge NLP processes and techniques so that you can master your life and take charge of your destiny. So if that sounds good, make sure you click that subscribe button so you can get these videos on a regular basis. These are very strange times we're living in right now, and with a lot of us staying home from work, sheltering in place, staying indoors unless we absolutely have to go out, like to grocery shop, it can feel more lonely than usual. A lot of us do deal with loneliness, but it can feel like it's compounded right now. So this is a great time to understand what is happening when you feel alone and to actually do something about it, because it's not like you're just stuck. There is something you can do about this. I have a lot of experience spending time alone. I actually, in many cases, enjoy spending time alone. I'm more on the introverted spectrum than an extrovert. I do like being around people, and I need to be around people and connect with people, but I'm also quite happy being alone. But there have been times where I've been surrounded by friends and felt incredibly lonely. So I don't like feeling lonely just because I like being alone. And a lot of introverts are the same way. They enjoy their alone time because it helps us recharge our batteries, so to speak. But we don't like the feeling of loneliness. I don't know anyone who likes the feeling of loneliness. One of the most memorable times that I felt an intense amount of loneliness was when I was splitting with my ex-wife and moving out of the house where my kids lived, which was really, really difficult because I had always been in their life very close, living in the same place as them, and suddenly I was out. On top of that, I had never lived alone. I had, of course, when I was a kid, lived with my parents and my brothers. When I was in college, I had a dorm mate. And then when I moved out of the dorm, I had an apartment with roommates. After that, I moved in with my girlfriend, who then became my wife. And so suddenly, at the age of 37, I was living alone. And I remember it was probably about a week after I had moved out, and I woke up one morning and I was washing my face, and I just had this strange feeling come over me. And I had to stop and really ask myself, what is that feeling? It felt familiar, but then it felt kind of foreign at the same time. And I just realized, I was like, oh yeah, that's loneliness. It's probably a good idea to kind of get used to that. Also around that time, I was just getting back into dating, and I hadn't been in the dating scene for about 15 years. So this was very strange. I wanted to date to understand better what a good relationship would eventually be. I wanted to eventually get back into a good relationship, but I figured I needed to get to know people all over again. It was a very strange period of time. And I got to the point where I had a very full dating life, where I was going on dates a few times a week. But the strangest thing again was it was also one of the loneliest times that I ever experienced. And I couldn't understand it because there was always someone I was engaging with. And when I wasn't dating, of course, I was visiting with my kids. I had clients, and yet I felt really, really lonely. What I started to understand about loneliness was that it was a feeling of distance between myself and other people. One of the models, or the main model that I study and that I use in my coaching practice, is the self-concept model created by Steve Andreas. And even at that time, when I was experiencing a lot of loneliness, I was very good at this model, and I made it work for myself and for my clients. And it's all about installing qualities that you value into your identity so that you have greater self-worth, greater confidence, greater self-esteem. And so I was experiencing all of those things, and I was experiencing loneliness. And I didn't know of a quality necessarily that I could install in my identity so that I wouldn't feel lonely. But I was overlooking this other part of the model that has to do with connection and boundaries and how we feel disconnected from people. And it also uses the process of mapping across, which And mapping across is one of the earliest processes in NLP, but you find it throughout almost all NLP processes. There's some form of mapping across, because NLP is a model for modeling, and mapping across is one of the ways that we model. So what you can start to understand when it comes to feeling disconnection is that it often has to do with a boundary that you've created around yourself, a boundary that you created in order to protect yourself. Now, this boundary can be very useful in the sense that it can alert you to dangers or possible people around you who could pose a danger to you. But what's interesting about neurology is we tend to react neurologically to physical threats the same way that we tend to react neurologically toward emotional pain the same way that or the threat of emotional pain the same way that we would react to the threat of physical pain. So when I think of getting up and giving that talk, and I remember being humiliated or embarrassed, years ago when I was a kid, then I start to feel that same sort of threat, like it's life-threatening, even though it's really not. And my border goes up, and I want to protect myself, just as if someone was going to attack me. And we do the same thing for people who we think might be verbally abusive, or we have that border in place, or somebody who might give us criticism that is unwelcome. We have a way of putting that boundary up. And so what this part of the model does is it shows you how to elicit that boundary. And not only that, you can take times in your life when you were very connected to one or more people, where you were very much in rapport with a person, and go back to that time and remember, well, what was that like, and where was my boundary then? So one of the ways that you can elicit your boundary is to imagine there's a person you don't know, not a sinister looking person, not a bad person, but just a person you don't know. And imagine that person coming closer and closer to you. How close would you allow that person to get to you before you go, stop, you're too close? That's one way that you can start to get a sense of where this boundary is. And your boundary has a shape to it. As you elicit it, you can give it a color, and the colors will make it feel differently. You can check in with, well, what's it like inside your boundary, and what's it like outside of your boundary? And you can even give that a color so that you can have a better sense of this. Now, you might be thinking, well, it sounds like you're just making stuff up. When you elicit it and you start playing around with that boundary, you will feel it. It will feel quite different. And so you could say, sure, yeah, I'm making this up, but it's just as real to you as anything else. It's just as real as somebody getting too close to you and you go, it's like, how do you know to do that? That's what the boundary is there for. But we put that boundary up a lot of times when it's really not needed, when we're not under any real physical threat. Sure, anybody can say anything to you at any time, and it can be mean and hurtful, but we don't have to take it that way. And now I'm getting into other processes, but there's a lot of NLP processes that can help you with that as well. And the mapping across one, I've done a video on mapping across. You'll find that in the description below. What I want to bring your awareness to, though, is that boundary. And ask yourself, well, what happens if I were to either let that boundary drop or open that boundary to include people who I want to connect with? And when you really have a sense of that boundary, and you can consciously make that choice to include people inside that boundary, and maybe you need to just know that you trust that person, and then you feel safe to let them in. You will feel connected with people immediately. It is amazing how well this works. So take some time and elicit that boundary, and think about times when you felt really connected with people and times when you felt really disconnected with people. And then actually drop into those memories and think about, okay, well, where was my boundary here? And when you felt really disconnected, you're going to find that that boundary was like a fortified wall, a concrete wall or something, keeping your distance from people. And it may have been completely unnecessary. In fact, a lot of times it is, because you're not under any real danger. And then go to the times, drop into the memories when you felt very connected with people, almost like you were one with them. And where was your boundary there? and you're going to find that they were inside your boundary. And that's why you felt so connected to them. That's why you felt so close. And the more you play around with this and the more you work with it, the more you will have the feeling or the sense that you are in control of this. You can let that boundary drop completely, but if that feels too unsafe, you can just learn to include other people in your boundary, and they don't even need to be in your presence. You know, you ever think about someone and you get a warm feeling about them? It's because you're feeling their presence. You can think about people who mean a lot to you and imagine they're right here inside your boundary. Now, I know we're not supposed to go out, we're not supposed to congregate, but we can do video calls, and I've been doing that lately with friends because I do miss being around people. And even when you do video calls, you can imagine that person being inside your boundary, and you will feel more connected to them. It doesn't matter that you're looking at a two-dimensional screen or any of those things, because it's really about their presence, and you carry the presence of people in your neurology. That's the way that you can remember who they are. That's how you have a sense of who they are. It's not like you have to be in that person's presence to only have a sense of them. You don't forget your friends when they're not right there with you. You carry your friends, you carry your loved ones with you. So you can feel their presence more closely just by thinking about them and thinking about them in terms of being inside your boundary. There's one other thing I wanted to add to this. It was a wise person who told me one time when I was mentioning about my feeling lonely or feeling disconnected. And he said, he's very Zen kind of Buddhist type guy. And he said, that's the strange thing about human beings is we don't want to be alone, but the actual truth is that we're always alone. Even when we're around people, we're still alone because we can't share our individual existence with anyone. Like there's only me or there's only you occupying your existence. We can't share that. We can be around people, we can be close to people, but we're always really alone. And that's the thing that probably has plagued humans since we were conscious, intelligent beings. But here's what you can think about, and this is going meta to it all, is that though we are alone, technically speaking, we're not alone in our aloneness. Now that's something you can sit and think about and meditate for quite some time. You're not alone in your aloneness. We're all the same. If you'd like to learn more about this model, the self-concept model, and you'd like to take this even deeper, if you go to the description right here down below, you will find a link, and you click on that link and you can take a free assessment. You just answer some questions and your results will be emailed to you. And it has to do with who you perceive yourself to be, what area of life would you like to work on, who would you like to become in order to have the life that you want to live. It's an absolutely free assessment. Take advantage of that. Like I said, it's in the description right here down below. Make sure you click the like button if you like this video. And if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button and hit the bell so you get these videos on a regular basis. Last but not least, if you know of a friend or a family member who you think would benefit from this video, make sure you share it with them. Take care.